This is a story about break-ins, bugging and spying. It's about a dirty war between two age-old enemies, Republicans and the security services. It's led to the collapse of Stormont.
I think actually people should feel very angry with the Republican movement for not playing the game properly.
And it's deepened distrust among politicians.
There is an agenda in here, which is anti-Republican, which is about the DUP.
There will be no inclusive executive with Sinn Fein as long as the IRA is in business and engaged in criminality.
Hundreds of people have had to move home.
We were shocked that somehow the details of approximately 1,400 prison officers had got into the hands of an illegal organisation.
The affair has cost the taxpayer over £30 million. The police investigation has been closed down with no convictions amid claim and counterclaim.
I'm not sure it was PSNI or whether it was MI5 or the Securocrats, the kind of broad term, but there's a group of people who do not want this peace process to succeed.
There was no political policing in this case.
What is now clear is who the police were hoping to catch.
It was about a bigger fish. It was about the hope that the IRA's Director of Intelligence would walk into the surveillance net.
But the affair has left a trail of unanswered questions.
Here was somebody who, as I said, boasted about being a member of the Irish Republican Army, talked about with foreknowledge about Gibraltar and other major operations, some of which went terribly wrong. Was it because this British agent, Denis Donaldson, had betrayed these individuals?
Questions need to be asked of the people who conspired and brought these charges in the first place.
Do you feel vindicated? Do you feel today that your reputation has been restored in the eyes of everyone?
Absolutely. My name is Denis Donaldson. I have worked for British intelligence and the RUC PSNI Special Branch.
Tonight, Spotlight investigates the Stormont Gate affair. It's a story that begins with one informer and ends with another. It's a tale of secret police operations, surveillance and political intrigue. Tonight we'll ask why one of the biggest security operations ever mounted ended with the arrest of a police spy and brought down the Stormont executive. And we'll show what the security services wanted to protect so much that they were prepared to see spying charges dropped rather than reveal secrets in open court. Last December, the Public Prosecution Service decided it would not be in the public interest to press charges against these three men. For 3 years, Kieran Kearney, Denis Donaldson and Billy Mackesy faced charges of being involved in a spy ring. Donaldson was Sinn Féin's administrator at Stormont. He joined the IRA in the 1960s and spent time in prison with Bobby Sands after being jailed for 10 years. On his release, he travelled the world for Sinn Féin and the IRA, and he once visited the Middle East to negotiate the release of Belfast hostage Brian Keenan. In 1989, he was sent to New York to work for the Republican group NORAID.
He was a key player, of course. I mean, he wouldn't have been sent out unless he was a key player. Denis Donaldson was not an eco-tourist coming to New York to study the peace process between the Crips and the Bloods. He was sent out by the Republican movement to run part of the Republican movement here in this country.
He travelled widely across the United States and quickly got a reputation as Sinn Féin's enforcer.
He was very much a troubleshooter who came out from Ireland to sort out problems that had developed, particularly in the aftermath of the split in 1986 when Republican Sinn Féin was formed, and Michael Flannery, the then head of NORAID, tried to start a similar organisation out here. Denis was one of the people who came out and tried to keep NORAID together, basically.
On his return to Belfast, Denis Donaldson continued to work for Sinn Féin. In the early stages of the peace process, he took part in a series of groundbreaking discussions with members of the Unionist community at Clonard Monastery.
I found Denis, and I think everybody in the group found Denis, a very warm character, very intelligent, very open, witty, always the one with a sort of gleam in his eye, and a wisecrack or whatever. So Denis was a very, very likeable person, and I liked him very much.
I'd work anywhere.
His easygoing manner served him well at Sinn Féin's Stormont office. But away from the pressure cooker world of politics, the veteran IRA man liked to relax by going shooting, often on farmland in County Down. But in 2002, the hunter became the hunted, ending in his arrest. Police were led to him as a result of a tip-off. After the Castlereagh break-in in March 2002, Special Branch got a breakthrough when someone contacted them with information about an IRA intelligence unit. It was to be the start of Stormont Gate.
A man approached the police. My understanding is he went to Grosvenor Road Police Station. He asked to see the Special Branch. He had had a falling out with a senior Republican in Belfast. He offered to work for the Special Branch. This man is not a significant Republican figure. His significance was what he was able to tell the Special Branch. He was able to show them a number of the so-called Stormont Gate documents, and he was able to identify the house where the Stormont Gate documents were being held.
Special Branch officers then began an investigation codenamed Operation Torsion. The house where the documents and a laptop were being stored was watched, and in a daring operation, when the owner went away, officers got inside.
The Special Branch entered that house using what they call alternative means of entry. The documents and the laptop computer were in a sports bag underneath a bed in the house. They took those documents away to police headquarters. They photocopied the documents. They put it back into the house. They bugged both the computer and they bugged the bag in which the documents were being held. And these were what are called locator bugs, so tracking devices. So if the computer moved or if the bag moved, the Special Branch would know it was moving and where it had moved to.
Operation Torsion was now achieving results. Special Branch had copies of hundreds of documents which included information about leading loyalists and unionists. On a laptop, officers say they found the personal details of hundreds of prison staff. By now, police were convinced they had uncovered a sophisticated spying and targeting operation run by the IRA.
Very sensitive documents that covered a range of issues were in the hands of people who had no right to own them. Documents, for example, conversations between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States at one end, but at the other end, targeting information about prison officers, information about police officers, information about other people who are working for government. Now, that was the stuff that really caused me some serious concern.
The government stuff?
Personal information about people working for my organisation, for the judiciary, and indeed for Northern Ireland Office, and indeed prison officers.
Investigative journalist Duncan Campbell was employed by the defence to inspect the documents taken from Stormont. He says the papers couldn't be used for targeting.
There was about 1,000, slightly more pages, the vast majority of which were low-level copies of ministerial correspondence, daily bulletins, who's on duty in the press office, letters in from MPs out to organisations, stuff that had been, on the face of it, photocopied by somebody in one of the buildings in Stormont over the period of about 15, 16 months, finishing about a year before the affair happened.
But the authorities were satisfied they had penetrated an IRA intelligence unit. Special Branch now involved MI5, and the Secretary of State John Reid sanctioned a bugging operation. It was now a waiting game. What Special Branch hoped was that the trail would lead them to the IRA's Director of Intelligence. He was suspected of being involved in the Castlereagh break-in in 2002, when details of Special Branch officers and their agents were stolen. It was the worst breach of security the force had ever suffered, and investigators wanted to arrest the IRA unit they believed were responsible.
They wanted us to stop them. They blamed them for Castlereagh. They blamed them for a series of high-value robberies that had gone on in Northern Ireland, and they wanted to get them.
In October 2002, they believed that opportunity was about to happen. The bag containing the Stormont documents and the laptop were moved to different houses. Using tracking devices, the security services were able to pinpoint their new locations. The bag turned up in the home of Denis Donaldson. The laptop was in the home of 47-year-old Fiona Farrelly. She was arrested, as was Denis Donaldson and his son-in-law Kieran Kearney.
Kieran Kearney was certainly a very bright guy. He was a senior Sinn Fein advisor. He was somebody who was used, I've heard, in sensitive contacts with other political parties. He was somebody who would have been used to look at, for instance, documents coming up in talks and advising a response. It was a very important backroom boy, a very important advisor.
Well, not at this stage.
Billy Mackesy, who had worked as a messenger at Stormont, was also arrested. He had been spotted making unauthorised photocopies and was suspected of passing them on to Sinn Fein. After the house arrests, it was a more public raid that would grab all the headlines. Shortly after the police operation in West Belfast, 30 officers arrived at Stormont to search the Sinn Fein offices where Denis Donaldson worked.
This is the most highly political act, and worse than that, it's anti-agreement.
The sight of police officers raiding Sinn Fein offices at Stormont led to accusations that the police were acting politically. Although the police ombudsman would later accept the operation was necessary, she did criticise the way it was carried out.
We accept that fully. We accepted the findings of the Ombudsman's recommendation without qualification. We know it could have been done in a different way.
The raid on Stormont and the claims about spying pushed an ailing power-sharing executive into intensive care. This came after the raid at Castlereagh and amidst ongoing allegations about IRA activity. For First Minister David Trimble, it was the last straw.
When the event occurred, while, as I say, there was a tactical surprise in that it was Stormont, strategically I was not surprised, and strategically it met the bill. And it was that day when I made it clear to London that unless they acted very quickly to provide an alternative, we were going to withdraw.
10 days after the Stormont raid, John Reid suspended devolution and direct rule was introduced. By now, 4 people were charged in connection with the Stormont spy ring. Spotlight understands that the Stormont papers included correspondence, briefings, phone numbers and Sinn Féin documents. There was also a note containing the car registration number of the most senior army officer in Northern Ireland.
It was very difficult to work it out. It certainly didn't seem to me to provide any security important information unless it had been used within 24 hours of being received.
Why would Republicans have the registration of the GOC?
Because I think what was happening was they were lifting anything of interest, and this was a note that was passed through.
But that could be interpreted as targeting.
No, I don't think it's information, right? If I thought the man who was lifting these copies was applying his intelligence to targeting, I would be very concerned.
Hello, welcome to the programme. The top stories this evening. Exclusive.
Back in 2002, as the accused legal team began to prepare their defence, the BBC revealed that Special Branch had been aware of the spy ring allegations before arrests were made.
This evening on BBC Newsline, we report on Operation Torsion.
The story prompted anger amongst hundreds of prison officers whose details it was claimed were found on the laptop. Nearly 500 of them had to move home. Many wanted to know why they hadn't been warned earlier.
The police were in receipt of the information for some time before it actually became public knowledge, or we were ever informed.
But do you accept that the police acted promptly here?
Well, again, I don't wish to undermine what the police do. I think they have done an excellent job down through the years. However, they, for whatever reason, decided. But I think, in fairness to prison staff, our concern is our families. And I think from that point of view, the police didn't act as promptly as what they should have acted.
I don't want to go into specifics of the time taken to run this investigation for very good and sound policing reasons. But I am confident that when people needed to be warned, they were warned, and when protection measures needed to go in, they did go in.
Later, the story made headlines again. when Bill Larry, the head of Special Branch in Belfast, retired, alleging he'd been pressurised not to make arrests.
I felt that during the whole operation which I was running, constant and consistent pressure from the security services that it would be better if we didn't take skulls, if we just took the papers and would leave the provisional IRA, Sinn Fein, a chance of denying that they were involved in it.
For the next year, the Stormont Gate affair dragged on, and then the prosecution case appeared to be in difficulty. In December 2003, proceedings against Fiona Farrelly were dropped. Then 2 months ago, the charges against the remaining defendants were withdrawn.
My final judgment, which I then sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions, was to prosecute this case would not be in the wider public interest to do, and certainly from a professional police officer's point of view would have caused us substantial difficulties in the future in relation to the way we investigate serious and organised crime.
For the accused, the decision was greeted with elation, proving to them that the Stormont Gate affair had been invented and was politically motivated.
Just this way over here, guys.
It has been something I would not wish on anybody. I and Denis and Billy were vilified, demonised. Misinformation was spread about us. It was reported widely, much of it by the media, and we have never had a chance to answer all of that.
But unionists believe that the case had collapsed because the British government wanted to let Republicans off the hook.
What is the public interest? Was it that it was going to reveal even higher political involvement in this crime? Was that what was scaring the government in their political negotiations?
So why did the case collapse? Behind the official reasons, Spotlight's been told there are a series of issues that led to the prosecution's decision. What's now clear is that Special Branch wanted to protect the identity of the informer who had originally led them to the Stormont Gate documents. He was the man who walked into a police station in the spring of 2002. The Crown also wanted to keep the Special Branch operations secret, including surveillance and bugging. But they're not allowed to do this without the permission of a judge.
If the judge rules the information should be disclosed, the prosecution then have to decide whether to disclose it given its sensitive nature, or the other choice sort of starkly facing them in that situation is that they may not want to disclose it, but the situation then would be that they would have to drop the case.
In this case, the prosecution service decided to drop the charges. Spotlight's been told by two well-placed sources that part of what the police wanted to protect was crucial fingerprint evidence. When the Stormont Gate documents were forensically tested, the results were revealing. At an early stage in the prosecution, a court was told that the documents contained Kieran Kearney's fingerprints. But two well-placed sources have told Spotlight that there were other prints on the documents. One source has told us that one set of fingerprints belonged to the informer who tipped police off, and another set belonged to a Special Branch officer. Spotlight understands that officers wore gloves, so the existence of police fingerprints is not only embarrassing, but could have compromised the prosecution case.
Since it's been disclosed that the documents themselves made a journey to British intelligence before they were lifted in Stormont Gate, they are completely tainted. In legal terms, you can't rely on them being the true documents or the fingerprints being the true fingerprints. The fact that the full-scale presence of fingerprints was never fully examined, or if examined was never reported, it was a matter and is a matter of concern.
And that goes to the heart of the case.
The issue of fingerprints must be at the heart of the case.
The existence of the walk-in informer's fingerprints throws up another difficulty for the Crown. Clearly, his identity couldn't be made public because it could put his life in danger. But since fingerprints were such a key issue, the defence would demand full disclosure.
If the information was relevant to the case, and any information regarding fingerprints on a document it would seem relevant information, then the principle is that the prosecution cannot themselves withhold that information from the defence.
So faced with proceeding and revealing the details of an informant and secret Special Branch operations, the PSNI asked for the charges to be dropped. Ironically, the efforts made to protect the identity of the walk-in informer indirectly led to the outing of Denis Donaldson as a police agent. When the Stormont court case fell, there was much speculation that an informer was involved. 3 days after the charges were withdrawn, police arrived at Donaldson's house to tell him that a journalist knew about his secret past.
He said that he was warned by the police that he was about to be exposed, and then a story was circulated that he was about to be exposed in the newspaper. And I'm pretty much satisfied that isn't true, because I think any journalist who had been onto the story would have said so. So it seems as if Denis Donaldson was visited by the police, given a warning, and panicked.
After the police visit, Denis Donaldson rang a party official to tell him what had happened.
My understanding is that Denis Donaldson contacted a senior figure in the Sinn Fein leadership, that he was then interviewed over the next couple of days by a number of people in the Sinn Fein leadership.
Denis Donaldson told Sinn Fein officials he had been working for Special Branch. He was then suspended from the party and expelled. During the briefing, it appears he told party activists little about his past. 2 days later, he turned up in Dublin and read a statement on camera.
My name is Denis Donaldson. I worked as a Sinn Féin Assembly Group Administrator in Parliament buildings. I was a British agent at the time. I was recruited in the 1980s after compromising myself during a vulnerable time in my life. Since then, I have worked for British intelligence and the RUC PSNI Special Branch. Over that period, I was paid money.
Denis Donaldson's confession sent shockwaves through the Republican community, and for some it raised questions about the judgment of the Sinn Féin leadership.
Denis Donaldson was not a two-bit player, because Denis Donaldson could travel to America, dismiss people, come into South Down, dismiss people, go anywhere and dismiss people. And he was judge, jury and executioner. And his decisions were obviously not questioned. Now, that is either total incompetence by the leadership or it's collusion.
For Sinn Féin, the Donaldson affair has brought embarrassment, anger and hurt.
The closer you are to someone like that, then the betrayal has to increase nearly in proportion. So people would feel it very keenly there. And, you know, the guy was at it for 20 years. That's a long time. The guy was taking money, you know, which makes it worse. So there are certain things which are known about this in the public arena, and people are affected by that, you know.
In America, that sense of anger is shared by those who were once Denis Donaldson's colleagues. John McDonough used to drive him to meetings across the United States. Shortly after his televised confession, he was contacted by a friend from Ireland.
About an hour later, I got a phone call, and they go, listen, you're not going to believe this, but Denis Donaldson was a British agent for 20 years. I said, listen, go back, read the internet. You have to be wrong. You're crazy. And he says, no, Denis has admitted it. I almost crashed the car. I said, oh, my God. And I know everyone I talked to were racking their brains. What did we say to Denis?
Martin Galvin is another who's wondering what secrets Denis Donaldson told the security services during the time he worked with him in New York.
How many Republicans did he betray? Did he betray Gibraltar? Did he betray military operations? Certainly he was an agent and traitor during his time, part of his time in the Irish Republican Army. How many people were jailed? How many people were killed because of this British agent's collusion?
So why did Special Branch move against Denis Donaldson if he had been an agent? Spotlight has been told that he met his handler before his arrest, but he didn't tell him about the Stormont Gate documents.
Once this stuff started to move, the computer had gone to one house, the documents had gone to Denis Donaldson's house. There was a view that, you know, they could have been moved again. My understanding is that had Denis Donaldson told the Special Branch, told his handler that those documents were in his house, that Special Branch would have allowed one more move in this operation. They would have allowed the bag to move on. The suggestion is he didn't tell them. That's why he was arrested, and that's why the documents were seized at that stage.
Other observers agree that Denis Donaldson's decision to keep the documents secret from his handler meant officers had to act.
He said he'd met his handlers shortly before his arrest, I think a matter of days before his arrest, and he obviously hadn't told them at that stage, and they decided, well, then you're on your own, Dennis.
So that was the motive to move?
The phrase that was used to me was that he was caught with his fingers in the till. That it was an equivalent situation. He was doing something he didn't tell the authorities about, and therefore he had no claim on their protection.
Spotlight's been told by a number of sources that Donaldson had been an informer, but in recent times had passed on little significant information. The PSNI won't confirm if Denis Donaldson was working for them, but it's clear if he had made his handlers aware of the documents in his house, there might have been a different outcome.
If someone is a registered informant, that is to say, we know about them and they provide intelligence to us that allows us to protect the wider community, they are allowed in very specific circumstances to technically break the law. For example, the getaway driver of a serious armed robbery may have an authority to act as the driver in that situation, and that's all. That doesn't put them above the law, but it means we know what they're going to do. Now, if that individual operates steps 1 iota over that authority, all bets are off.
3 years on, Hugh Ward still insists that it was right to proceed with the Stormont spying charges, but he now accepts the matter is at an end.
Well, in terms of the 3 individuals, they're entitled to the presumption of innocence. They are innocent in law. So as far as I'm concerned, the case is finished. As we've said before, we're not looking for anyone else in relation to this inquiry. The matter is closed.
The legal process may have ended, but the repercussions of Stormont Gate are still being felt. Devolution remains suspended, trust between politicians is elusive, and questions still persist about the intentions of the IRA. The case also shows how much Special Branch had to protect, its use of informers and its secret operations. Proof that the intelligence war remains in place. Denis Donaldson's world collapsed when he exposed his double life. He's left his Belfast home and he's now in hiding.
Can he return to Belfast?
He can do whatever he wants, frankly, and that's something that he has to work out. Whether he will return to Belfast or not is something that only he can answer. I mean, we shouldn't be naive. This is, in Republican and nationalist terms, well, even in Irish terms, to be an informer is pretty bad stuff, you know.
I mean, 15 or 20 years ago, he may have lost his life.
That's true.
So is he safe to return to Belfast?
Absolutely, he is. There is no, he has no fear from Republicans.
Denis Donaldson is a unique on the run, an outcast from the state and his own community, a victim of the dirty war that still trades in spies and lies.